Psalm 121, heaven watches over you. No hidden trap can steal your destiny. There are passages in Scripture that do not simply speak to the intellect, but pierce through to the soul's hidden core, awakening within us the awareness that we are not alone on this vast and unpredictable journey of life. Psalm 121 is one such passage. It is a psalm of divine assurance, a song of trust, and a declaration that heaven itself bends down to guard the footsteps of those who walk in faith. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. In those first lines, we encounter the essence of spiritual stability, the recognition that protection, provision, and peace do not come from the visible world, but from an invisible and eternal source that governs all things. Psalm 121 was sung by travelers on their way to Jerusalem, a psalm for those climbing mountains, both literal and symbolic. It speaks to anyone who has ever faced uncertainty, betrayal, fear, or danger, reminding us that the one who created the universe also watches intimately over each heartbeat. It assures us that there is no snare too hidden, no weapon too secret, and no curse too powerful to overthrow a destiny written by God Himself. This psalm declares a truth that transcends fear. Heaven's eyes never close. In a world filled with spiritual warfare, invisible battles, and unseen traps of the enemy, Psalm 121 is not merely poetic comfort, it is divine armor. It is a reminder that while men plot and circumstances shift, the protection of God is constant and absolute. The believer is not an orphan wandering through chaos, but a child under the direct guardianship of the Almighty. Every step, every breath, every crossing of shadow and light, God watches. This message is not only about defense from evil, but about trust in divine order. It teaches us that even when we cannot see how God is protecting us, He is already working. It tells us that what feels like delay is divine timing, and what appears as danger is often the training ground of destiny. The believer who internalizes this psalm does not live in fear of traps, because they know that heaven does not sleep, and the God who keeps them neither slumbers nor turns His gaze away. Let us walk now through the spiritual revelations hidden within Psalm 121, discovering what it means to live under the watchful eyes of heaven, where no hidden trap can steal what God has ordained. The eyes of heaven never sleep. Understanding the divine watchfulness of God, there is a deep spiritual mystery in the words, "He who watches over you will not slumber." It speaks of an eternal awareness, a vigilance that surpasses human understanding. To comprehend this verse is to grasp the essence of divine care, not as a distant oversight, but as an intimate guardianship that sustains life itself. In human terms, to watch over someone means to protect them temporarily, to be alert for a season, or to guard them during specific moments of danger. But when the psalmist writes that God will not slumber, he is revealing an attribute of God's nature. He is consciousness itself. God does not rest because He is the source of all rest. He does not grow weary because weariness belongs to those who depend on time and energy. God is beyond both. This revelation transforms our perception of protection. Many people imagine divine help as an intervention that arrives in moments of crisis, but Psalm 121 dismantles that notion. It teaches that God's protection is not reactive. It is constant. The Lord does not awaken when you call. He was already watching before you knew you were in danger. The enemy's schemes are not uncovered by your prayers. They were already seen by the eternal eyes that govern the flow of time itself. Consider this. Before you even perceived the shadow of betrayal, God had already encircled you with His defense. Before the enemy conceived a plot, heaven had written the countermeasure. Before fear entered your heart, love had already prepared the remedy. That is the nature of a God who does not slumber. When David says that he will not let your foot slip, it is not poetic exaggeration, it is divine reality. God does not simply prevent your fall. He orchestrates the terrain beneath you. Even the stones that once tripped you are reshaped by his mercy into stepping stones for your ascent. Every apparent failure becomes a safeguard, every delay a rerouting of divine precision. But here lies a truth that few understand. Divine protection is not always visible. Many cry out for proof that God is guarding them, but his most powerful interventions are often the ones that remain unseen. The car that didn't cross your path, the sickness that never reached your body, the deal that fell through but would have enslaved your soul, the friend who left so that heaven could protect your peace. The watchfulness of heaven is silent but absolute. And for those who doubt, the psalm gives an image. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. In the ancient world, shade symbolized relief, protection, and proximity. A shadow is only cast when something stands near. God is not a distant watcher gazing from the heavens. He is so near that his presence creates shade over your soul. He covers you not from afar, but beside you. Imagine this truth in your daily life. Every unseen danger, every plan formed in secret against you, every invisible spirit of envy, destruction, or confusion, the moment it approaches, it finds itself confronted by the living presence of God. It cannot advance, for the shadow of the Almighty surrounds you. That is why Psalm 91 declares, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." The shade of the Lord is the barrier that darkness cannot penetrate. When heaven watches, nothing escapes. When heaven guards, no trap can succeed. But this does not mean that the believer is exempt from challenges. God's protection does not remove the battlefield. It ensures victory upon it. You may face battles, but you will not be defeated. You may walk through fire, but it will not consume you. You may feel alone, but you are surrounded by invisible hosts of light. To live under the gaze of heaven is to walk with confidence through uncertainty, knowing that divine sight perceives every dimension, past, present, and future. The believer's task is not to eliminate fear, but to transform it into faith. Fear says, "What if God doesn't see?" Faith replies, "He already saw, and He has already acted." Even as you rest tonight, understand this truth. Heaven does not close its eyes. While you sleep, God is awake. While you worry, He works. While you feel unseen, His gaze never wavers. Every angelic assignment, every spiritual guard, every divine orchestration moves in perfect synchrony to keep your destiny intact. No curse, no gossip, no hidden spell, no generational bondage can override the watch of the Almighty. For what He guards, none can snatch, and what He blesses, none can curse. This is the confidence of those who stand under Psalm 121, not arrogance, but awareness of divine covering. Lift up your eyes today, not in fear of the mountains ahead, but in trust of the One who made them. Your help is not coming, it is already here. Heaven is watching, and no hidden trap can steal your destiny. If this message touched your heart, remember to subscribe to the channel for more revelations that strengthen your faith and remind your soul of heaven's unending protection. The keeper of your soul, how divine protection operates beyond human understanding. There is a sacred truth hidden within Psalm 121 that few have dared to meditate upon deeply. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Hebrew word used for keep in this verse is shamar, which means to guard, preserve, and protect diligently as a shepherd does his flock. Yet, in the divine context, this keeping goes far beyond physical defense. It is the very safeguarding of the soul's purpose against corruption, despair, and deviation from divine alignment. This psalm does not merely promise that God will stop calamities. It reveals that his protection operates on a plane higher than human reasoning can perceive. To be kept by God is to be sustained by the wisdom that governs creation, a wisdom that allows what seems like loss to become salvation, what seems like delay to become preparation, and what feels like rejection to become redirection toward destiny. To understand the depth of this divine keeping, one must first accept that God's protection is not confined to what the eyes can see. When David wrote these words, he was not living in an environment free of enemies. On the contrary, his life was constantly in danger. Yet he spoke not from fear, but from revelation, the realization that divine watchfulness transcends the threats of this world. What looks like danger to the flesh may be the very situation God uses to train the spirit. The traps you fear may be the means through which God teaches you discernment. The losses that broke your heart may be the divine shield that prevented your destruction. Heaven's way of protecting you is not always by removing pain, but by giving it purpose. Think of the countless moments in your life when things did not go as planned, doors that closed just as you were about to step through, relationships that ended abruptly, paths that twisted in ways that made no sense. At that moment, you may have felt abandoned, as though heaven had turned away. But in the fullness of time, you come to see what your spirit already knew, that God was not absent. He was guarding you from the unseen consequences of your own desires. His no was not rejection, it was preservation. His silence was not neglect, it was orchestration. The same God who placed a flaming sword to guard the gates of Eden now places invisible barriers around your destiny, preventing anything or anyone from entering who could alter the design of his plan for your life. When the psalmist declares that the Lord will keep you from all evil, he is not suggesting that evil will never approach you. Rather, he's revealing that evil will never overtake you. You may walk through shadows, but the shadow cannot define you. You may feel the wind of the adversary's breath, but it cannot extinguish your flame. The word keep implies continual action, not a one-time rescue. God does not save you and then step back. He sustains your entire existence, moment by moment. It is not simply that he protects you when trouble comes. It is that trouble cannot fully manifest without passing through his will. The believer's life is encased within divine sovereignty. There are mysteries of protection that the rational mind cannot comprehend. How is it that a man can walk through the valley of death and come out untouched? How is it that in the midst of betrayal, God can use the betrayal itself to crown the faithful? The answer lies in the invisible nature of divine purpose. God's keeping is not passive, it is creative. He does not only defend, he transforms. The poison sent against you becomes the antidote to your own weakness. The darkness meant to destroy you becomes the contrast that reveals your light. This is the secret of divine guardianship. Nothing that reaches you escapes divine filtration. Every storm that touches your life has first been permitted, measured, and transformed by the hands of heaven. When you begin to live in awareness of this truth, fear begins to lose its power. You realize that nothing truly happens to you, it happens for you. You are not at the mercy of the world's chaos because your soul's script is written in divine ink. The enemy can observe but cannot edit. He can shout but cannot rewrite. This is why you survive what others cannot comprehend. This is why you stand when others expect your fall. Your survival is not coincidence. It is evidence of divine keeping. God's watchfulness is active even in your unawareness. While you sleep, the unseen forces of light stand guard around you. Angels, assigned before you were born, move in obedience to divine command. Some you will never know by name, yet they are closer than the air that sustains you. Every heartbeat continues because heaven wills it. Every step forward occurs because an unseen hand clears the path. You are surrounded by divine intelligence, a network of protection that no dark scheme can penetrate. But there is another dimension to this divine keeping. God not only guards you from external harm, but also from the internal destruction that comes from within. Sometimes the greatest threat to your destiny is not an enemy outside, but a weakness inside: fear, pride, doubt, or desire. The Lord's keeping, therefore, is not only about defending you from external evil, but transforming you inwardly so that the traps of your own nature lose power. This is why certain prayers go unanswered, why certain relationships fall apart, why certain dreams collapse. Because God is not merely keeping your life safe, He is keeping your soul aligned with eternity. His greatest work of protection is the refinement of the heart. Many times, people misinterpret God's discipline as distance. They assume that when the road becomes difficult, heaven has turned its face away. But this is not so. A shepherd disciplines the sheep not out of anger, but out of love. When the psalm says that the Lord keeps you, it implies that He is both guardian and guide. Sometimes His protection comes as comfort. Other times, it comes as correction. He will allow discomfort if it means protecting your destiny. He will close doors if those doors lead to destruction. He will delay your progress if the path ahead is laced with unseen snares. What looks like divine silence is often divine surgery, the cutting away of what cannot travel with you into the next chapter of your calling. The believer who truly understands Psalm 121 no longer begs for safety, they rest in sovereignty. Safety is temporary, but divine keeping is eternal. Safety depends on circumstances, but divine keeping depends on covenant. God does not promise that life will be free from storms. He promises that the storms will not drown you. He does not promise that you will never walk through darkness. He promises that the darkness will never overtake your light. Think about how this divine keeping has unfolded in your own story. There were moments when your plans collapsed, and you thought it was the end. But now, looking back, you see that if those plans had succeeded, they would have destroyed you. The relationship that ended saved your peace. The job you lost made space for your calling. The season of solitude taught you to hear God without noise. You thought you were being abandoned, but heaven was quietly removing every obstacle to your divine unfolding. That is what it means to be kept by God. The mystery of divine protection also reveals itself through timing. Sometimes God delays your breakthrough because He is positioning you for something greater. You may pray for a door to open, not realizing that behind that door is a trap disguised as opportunity. Heaven's delay is not heaven's denial, it is defense. God waits not because He is withholding, but because He is aligning. He is ensuring that when the blessing arrives, it does not destroy the one who receives it. A gift received out of season becomes a burden, but when God delivers it in His timing, it becomes destiny fulfilled. When the psalmist says, "The Lord will watch over your coming and going both now and forevermore," he is describing a guardianship that transcends linear time. God's watch is not confined to the present moment. It stretches backward and forward through eternity. He is the God who watches your past and redeems it, who watches your present and sustains it, and who watches your future and secures it. Nothing escapes His awareness. The traps laid years ago are already undone. The curses spoken generations back are already cancelled. The fear of what lies ahead dissolves under the gaze of a timeless God. This is why the believer must live in surrender rather than anxiety. To surrender is not to give up control. It is to acknowledge that you never truly had it. It is to trust that divine eyes see what you cannot, and divine hands are working even when yours can do nothing. Worry is the illusion that safety depends on your vigilance. Faith is the revelation that safety depends on God's unending watch. And yet, there is a deeper layer to divine protection still. God does not only protect individuals, He protects lineage. When the psalmist declares that the Lord will keep you forevermore, it implies that his keeping extends beyond your lifespan. The same watch that guards you now will continue through the generations that follow. Your faithfulness creates spiritual shelter for those who come after you. Every prayer you whisper today plants invisible fortresses around your descendants. The traps that were meant to destroy your family line end with you because heaven intervened through your obedience. God's keeping also manifests in peace, the peace that surpasses understanding. There is no greater form of protection than a mind anchored in trust. The world may tremble, nations may fall, but the soul guarded by God remains unmoved. The storms may rage outside, but within the believer there is an unshakable calm that comes from knowing that divine order governs all chaos. You are not kept merely by angelic defense, you are kept by divine peace, which acts as a fortress no weapon can penetrate. Even the smallest details of your existence fall under this divine vigilance. Every breath, every thought, every turn of the road. Nothing is random. The God who numbered the stars also numbers your steps. He knows the rhythm of your heartbeat, the count of your days, and the weight of your tears. There is not a single sigh that escapes his awareness. This intimate knowledge is not passive observation. It is active participation. Heaven does not simply watch, it intervenes. There are moments when God's keeping is revealed through miracles, an unexpected rescue, an impossible escape, a healing that defies logic. But far more often, his keeping reveals itself through quiet orchestration. The disaster that never happened, the meeting that never took place, the temptation that lost its power, the anxiety that suddenly lifted. The miracle of protection is often invisible because its purpose is not to be seen, but to be lived. The believer's challenge then is not to seek constant signs, but to cultivate constant awareness. You do not need proof that God watches over you. You need perception to see how he already has. When your spiritual eyes open, you begin to discern his fingerprints everywhere, in the timing of your steps, the alignment of events, the peace that returns without explanation. This awareness transforms daily life into worship, and so the psalmist concludes not with fear, but with finality. The Lord will watch over your life. That is not a future hope, but a present reality. Heaven's watch is eternal, unbroken, and unwavering. The traps of the enemy depend on darkness, but under divine light, they lose form. Every hidden snare dissolves when exposed to divine awareness. Walk today with the assurance that your life is not left to chance. You are encircled by purpose, guarded by mercy, and watched by eyes that never close. The same God who spoke creation into being still speaks over your path, commanding peace where there was fear, and order where there was chaos. You need not fear tomorrow, for heaven is already there. He who watches Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps, and he who watches you has written your name upon his heart. You are the kept of the Lord, the one guarded in secret, protected in purpose, and preserved in peace. If this message has deepened your faith, remember to subscribe to the channel for more teachings that awaken your spirit and remind you that your destiny is untouchable under the watchful eyes of heaven. The journey of faith, walking under the shadow of the Almighty. There is a hidden strength that flows through the life of one who has learned to trust God's watchful eyes. It is not the kind of strength that comes from comfort, but the strength that grows in the wilderness, in the long walks under uncertainty, in the silence of waiting, and in the faith that refuses to die when everything else crumbles. Psalm 121 is more than a declaration of divine protection. It is an invitation to walk with confidence through every terrain, knowing that your steps are numbered, your path is guided, and your destiny is shielded by a presence that never departs. It calls you to remember that your life is a pilgrimage, and every step, whether up a mountain or through a valley, is seen, measured, and accompanied by God himself. The psalm begins with a gaze lifted upward. I lift up my eyes to the hills. The believer's journey begins not by looking around, but by looking up. There is something profoundly spiritual about the act of lifting one's eyes. It is a gesture of surrender, a confession that our help cannot come from the ground we walk on, nor from the systems we build, nor from the strength of others, but from the eternal heights. This upward gaze is the posture of faith, a declaration that heaven's order transcends the world's chaos. To lift your eyes is to rise above fear, to anchor yourself not in circumstance, but in divine certainty. Faith, however, is not blind optimism. It is not pretending that the mountains are easy to climb or that the valleys are shallow. It is seeing the full weight of the journey and still trusting that every incline, every storm, and every delay has divine purpose. Faith sees both the mountain and the maker of the mountain, and that vision changes everything. When the heart truly believes that heaven watches, fear becomes powerless. The traveler no longer trembles before the unknown. They walk with peace, for the path, though hidden, is holy. But this journey of faith demands something rare: endurance. Divine protection does not remove the need for perseverance. It requires it. The psalmist did not say that God carries us so that our feet never touch the ground. He said, "He will not let your foot slip." The difference is profound. God does not promise a journey without effort. He promises a journey without downfall. There will be moments when your legs shake, when your soul grows weary, when you feel forgotten, but heaven's keeping ensures that every stumble becomes a step forward. To be kept by God does not mean you will never fall. It means you will never stay fallen. This endurance grows through faith, tested by time. There are seasons when you cannot see the light, when prayers seem unanswered, and when heaven feels silent. But silence does not mean absence. It often means attention. In those moments, God is shaping your spirit for deeper trust. Faith without testing remains fragile. The believer who has walked through darkness and still proclaims, "My help comes from the Lord," has entered into a dimension of spiritual maturity that cannot be shaken by any wind. Every step of faith is a conversation between you and the eternal. The hills before you may represent challenges, temptations, fears, or uncertainties, but the upward gaze declares that none of these have the final word. Faith says, "Though I walk through the valley, I will fear no evil." Faith says, "The sun shall not strike me by day, nor the moon by night." Faith says, "He will keep my going out and my coming in." These are not the words of someone who denies danger, but of someone who knows that the presence of danger does not mean the absence of God. The believer who lives in this awareness walks differently. They no longer rush, panic, or compare their path to others. They understand that God's pace is not hurried because divine timing is perfect. What looks like delay in your eyes is precision in His. Heaven never arrives late. The moment you begin to trust this, peace begins to reign within you. You stop wrestling with the how and start resting in the who. You stop worrying about the route because you trust the guide. Yet this faith walk is not always accompanied by clarity. Often God leads us through fog, not to confuse us, but to teach dependence. If you saw the entire road ahead, you would rely on sight instead of faith. The path is revealed step by step, not because God enjoys mystery, but because trust cannot grow in certainty. It grows in surrender. When you take one step in faith, heaven reveals the next. That is the rhythm of divine companionship. One step, one revelation, one act of trust at a time. And this is precisely where many lose heart. They want God's promises without the process. They want the assurance of Psalm 121, but resist the terrain that makes its truth come alive. They want to be kept from harm, but also free to walk in their own will. Yet true faith is not convenience, it is consecration. It means surrendering your sense of control and choosing to walk even when the way is narrow, trusting that the one who watches will not allow your soul to be lost. The journey of faith is not a straight line. It is a weaving path between lessons and revelations. Sometimes God leads you up the mountain so you can see far. Other times, He leads you into the valley so you can learn humility. Sometimes He surrounds you with people to teach you love. Other times, He isolates you to teach you dependence. But in all things He watches, the hills, the valleys, the deserts, the rivers. Each one becomes a classroom of trust. Divine watchfulness does not mean God prevents all discomfort. It means He ensures every discomfort becomes divine refinement. Pain that once confused you begins to reveal its purpose when you see it through heaven's lens. The tears that once seemed wasted become the water that nourishes your growth. Every difficulty becomes a dialogue between the Creator and your soul. God does not waste suffering. He transforms it into sight. The Psalms phrase, "The Lord is your keeper," carries another layer of meaning. It suggests ownership. To be kept by God means you belong to Him fully and irrevocably. It is the kind of belonging that transcends human understanding, for it is not based on merit but on covenant. When heaven claims you, nothing in existence can claim you otherwise. You are sealed not by circumstance, but by divine decree. The world may try to label you, define you, or limit you, but heaven has already named you, and that name is protected. This belonging does not only ensure protection, it also brings direction. The same eyes that watch over you also lead you. The believer must understand that divine protection and divine direction are inseparable. Many seek God's covering but ignore His leading. Yet the safety of your soul lies not in staying still, but in moving where He leads. You cannot remain in the past and expect to walk under present grace. When God calls you forward, even into uncertainty, your safety lies in obedience. The place of divine instruction is the place of divine protection. Faith means trusting that the terrain of obedience is always safer than the comfort of disobedience. Abraham left his home without knowing where he was going, because he understood that safety was not a location, but a presence. Daniel stood before lions and remained untouched because divine purpose surrounded him like armor. Elijah walked through famine and still found provision because obedience positioned him within heaven's plan. The same God who kept them keeps you. He is not a distant observer, but a personal guide who walks beside you through every shadow. To walk under divine watchfulness is to walk with awareness. It means you begin to see the fingerprints of God in everything. The random encounter that changes your life, the delay that saves you, the intuition that warns you. These are not coincidences. They are the expressions of divine presence interacting with your journey. When heaven watches, nothing is random. Every leaf that falls, every step you take, every person you meet, every challenge you endure, each piece fits into a greater orchestration that leads your soul toward its destined completion. And as you walk, you begin to notice something extraordinary. The fear that once ruled you begins to dissolve. The awareness that heaven watches over you does not only comfort you, it transforms you. You start walking with confidence, not because you trust the path, but because you trust the one who leads you through it. The unknown becomes an opportunity to witness divine faithfulness anew. The dangers that once paralyzed you now become places where miracles unfold. The shadows that once frightened you now remind you that even in darkness, His eyes see perfectly. Faith is not the denial of fear. It is the decision to keep walking despite it. The believer who walks in trust learns to turn anxiety into prayer and prayer into peace. When worry rises, they remind themselves, "The Lord watches my going out and my coming in." When the enemy whispers threats, they remember, the keeper of my soul does not sleep. When exhaustion weighs them down, they lift their eyes again to the hills and whisper, my help comes from the Lord. That repetition is not weakness, it is spiritual warfare. Every time you declare it, you re-establish heaven's authority over your circumstances. The one who truly understands Psalm 121 begins to live differently. They no longer chase control. They rest in covenant. They no longer fight every battle. They stand firm and let God's presence fight for them. They no longer fear hidden traps, for they know that even before the snare is set, heaven has already planned the escape. The enemy plots in shadows, but the believer walks in light. The darkness cannot hide what heaven already sees. The deeper you walk in faith, the more you realize that the journey is not about arriving somewhere. It is about becoming someone. God's protection is not meant to make you passive but powerful. His keeping is meant to forge within you a soul that reflects divine endurance. You were not created merely to survive. You were created to shine even when surrounded by shadows. The journey under divine watchfulness is not meant to make you comfortable, but unbreakable. So the psalm becomes not only a song of safety, but a manifesto of transformation. It whispers to the weary traveler, you are seen, you are guided, you are guarded. It tells you that every step you take is part of a divine narrative, and no power can interrupt what God has begun. You are not walking toward uncertainty, you are walking toward fulfillment. The keeper of your soul has gone before you, stands beside you, and follows behind you. Therefore do not fear the road ahead. Lift your eyes and remember who walks with you. Heaven is not watching from a distance. Heaven walks beside you in every breath. Every trap laid in secret loses its power under divine light. Every curse breaks when confronted by divine purpose. Every fear dissolves when you remember that the one who made the mountains also watches your ascent. Walk then with courage. Let your steps echo faith. Let your life be a living psalm, declaring to all who see you that there is a God who watches, a God who keeps, and a God who finishes what he begins. The same eyes that saw you in the valley will see you reach the summit. The same hands that caught you when you fell will crown you when you arrive. Nothing that belongs to you can be lost under divine surveillance. The journey is long, yes, but you are never alone. The keeper of Israel watches your every step, not as a distant guardian, but as a father walking with his child. You are seen, known, loved, and kept. Let that truth settle deep in your spirit. If this message strengthens your heart, remember to subscribe to the channel for more spiritual revelations and meditations that help you walk in divine peace and unwavering faith under heaven's watchful gaze. The shield of the Spirit. When heaven blocks what you cannot see. There are moments in every believer's life when the visible world appears calm, yet something deep within senses that unseen battles are taking place beyond perception. Psalm 121 unveils a reality often ignored by the physical eye. Divine protection is not limited to what you can witness. It moves in the realm of the invisible, neutralizing dangers that never reach your awareness. The Lord is your shade at your right hand, says the psalmist. And in those few words lies one of the greatest spiritual revelations, the eternal truth that heaven stands between you and what seeks to harm you, shielding you from what your senses cannot detect. To understand this, one must realize that life is not fought only on material grounds. Behind every visible occurrence, there are spiritual causes, intentions, and energies at work. Every attack that manifests in the physical has its origin in the unseen. When Scripture says that the Lord will keep you from all evil, it is not merely referring to human wickedness or physical harm. It includes the thoughts whispered into your mind, the doubts that crawl into your faith, the despair that seeks to drain your hope, and the temptations disguised as opportunities. The divine shield extends not only over your body, but over your spirit, guarding you from corruption of the soul. In the ancient world, travelers crossing the desert were at risk not only from robbers or wild animals, but from the relentless sun that could strike them down by day and the bitter cold that could claim them by night. When the psalm declares that the sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night, it uses natural imagery to describe supernatural defense. The sun represents the external pressures of life, trials, challenges, persecutions, while the moon symbolizes the internal ones, fears, anxieties, and emotional darkness. In both realms, day and night, God's presence becomes a living shield that absorbs the impact of every blow meant to destroy you. This shield is not made of metal, nor is it seen by eyes of flesh. It is woven from divine light, the same light that separated chaos from creation. When you walk under that light, darkness cannot touch you. It can only watch from a distance. That is why the psalmist speaks of God as your shade. Shade implies proximity. You cannot cast a shadow unless you are near the source of light. God's shadow covers you because his presence surrounds you. He does not guard from afar. He envelops you. His watch is not distant surveillance but intimate covering. There are many who walk through life unaware of this shield, thinking that protection means the absence of problems. But true divine protection often manifests through problems. Sometimes the very obstacle that frustrates you is the wall God placed to redirect your steps. The delay you complain about might be the barrier that prevents disaster. The rejection that breaks your heart may be the hand of heaven removing you from hidden harm. Divine shielding is not always pleasant. Sometimes it feels like loss. Yet heaven's no is always mercy in disguise. If God were to lift his hand for even a moment, the invisible warfare surrounding you would consume everything. But he does not lift it. His vigilance is eternal. Every arrow that flies in secret, every curse spoken in darkness, every snare buried in silence, all meet the unbreakable defense of divine authority. When God decrees that your destiny is protected, no force in creation can override that decree. The spiritual laws that govern the cosmos bend in obedience to his will. The storms that rise against you dissolve before they reach your soul, because the shield of heaven intercepts them. The protection of God is not only defensive, it is transformative. When evil intentions are sent against you, they do not simply fail. They are often converted into blessings. Joseph's story in Genesis reveals this principle perfectly. What his brothers intended for harm, God turned for good. The pit that was meant to bury him became the passageway to his throne. The betrayal that should have destroyed him became the bridge to his destiny. This is how divine shielding works. It not only stops harm, it rewrites its purpose. Under the watchful eyes of heaven, even the enemy becomes an unwitting instrument of divine advancement. If you could see with spiritual sight, you would fall to your knees in awe of how many dangers God has already blocked. The diseases that never reached your body, the people you never met who could have derailed your peace, the accidents that never happened, the wrong paths you were never allowed to take. These are silent testimonies of divine interception. God's mercy is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet and unnoticed, but its effects are monumental. You are alive today not because you were careful, but because you were covered. You breathe not because you were strong, but because you were sustained. There were nights when despair whispered your name, but the angels of God stood guard around your spirit. There were traps laid before you that your wisdom would never have detected, but heaven's intelligence intervened long before you arrived. You were rescued from situations you never knew existed because divine sight operates beyond the limits of human perception. Many believers, when they do not perceive visible miracles, assume that God is inactive. But invisibility is often the highest proof of divine operation. The most powerful miracles are the ones you never see. When God's protection is at work, chaos loses form before it can appear. You cannot celebrate the danger that never arrived because you do not know it existed, yet that is the greatest miracle of all. The unseen mercy is the truest form of love, the love that works quietly, faithfully, endlessly, without seeking recognition. The protection of heaven also manifests through divine detours. You may plan a direction, but God, in His wisdom, will redirect you to prevent unseen disaster. Perhaps you intended to move, to invest, to connect, but something inside whispered hesitation. That pause, that delay, that sudden change of peace, it was not indecision, it was intercession. The Holy Spirit often guards us, not through thunderous warning, but through subtle unease. When peace withdraws, it is heaven's way of saying, stop. When peace returns, it is the permission of heaven saying, go. Learning to recognize this rhythm is part of walking under divine shielding. The shield of the Spirit is sensitive to truth. It operates where obedience resides. When the heart strays from divine alignment, that protection still covers but begins to instruct through correction. Many of life's sharp lessons are heaven's way of calling us back to the path where His shield functions perfectly. God does not punish those He loves. He protects them even from themselves. Every conviction, every uncomfortable realization, every inner redirection is the hand of the Lord strengthening your awareness of His covering. The spiritual shield also extends through prayer. When you pray, you align your consciousness with divine defense. Prayer is not merely asking, it is activating awareness. When you speak words of faith, you reinforce the boundaries heaven has established around your destiny. This is why Scripture calls believers to pray without ceasing. Not because God needs constant reminders, but because the act of prayer keeps your soul synchronized with divine frequencies. Prayer sharpens spiritual perception, allowing you to recognize traps before they form. When Psalm 121 says that God will watch your going out and coming in, it reveals a promise that covers every dimension of existence. Your going out refers to the moments when you step into the world, your actions, your interactions, your decisions. Your coming in refers to your inner life, your thoughts, your emotions, your quiet moments with God. Divine shielding operates in both realms. The same God who guards your body from harm guards your mind from deception. He protects you not only from external enemies, but from internal collapse. When you are overwhelmed by thoughts of fear or doubt, it is His Spirit that brings calm to your heart. That peace is not emotional, it is spiritual protection manifesting within. There is a profound comfort in knowing that God's protection is personal. It is not a general promise applied mechanically. It is a handcrafted covenant designed uniquely for you. The dangers you face, the lessons you need, the path you must walk, all are considered in the design of your protection. Heaven does not apply generic solutions. It tailors divine intervention to the needs of your soul. The shield that covers you fits only you because it was forged from your purpose. This is why comparison is dangerous to faith. When you look at someone else's journey and envy their peace, you fail to recognize the custom protection that surrounds your own life. Their path may look easier, but their shield is not yours. God designs protection based on purpose. The greater the calling, the greater the warfare, and the stronger the covering. You are guarded according to your assignment. Those chosen to carry more light will always attract more shadow, but heaven equips them with corresponding grace. In spiritual warfare, the unseen is where victory is decided. Many imagine that battles are won through physical strength, influence, or knowledge. But the true arena of victory is the heart. When fear enters, the shield weakens. When faith reigns, it strengthens. God's protection works perfectly in a heart that trusts. Doubt opens doors. Faith seals them. Every moment you choose to trust instead of panic, you fortify your spiritual shield. You may not see it, but in that invisible dimension, heaven reacts to faith like fire to oxygen. It grows brighter, stronger, and wider, pushing darkness farther away. This is why the enemy's first target is always belief. If he can convince you that you are unprotected, you begin to live as if you are. Fear attracts confusion, and confusion disrupts discernment. But the one who remembers Psalm 121 never doubts their safety. They live under a divine awareness that transforms fear into confidence. Their prayer becomes a declaration, not a plea. The Lord is my keeper, I will not fear. This is not arrogance, it is agreement with divine reality. To walk under divine shielding is to live in continual thanksgiving. Gratitude amplifies the shield's effect because it aligns the soul with divine joy. When you thank God even for what you do not understand, you acknowledge that His watchfulness is wiser than your perception. Gratitude is faith made audible. Every thank you is a proclamation that heaven is still at work. The grateful heart becomes impenetrable because it refuses to allow bitterness or fear to lodge within. And so, Psalm 121 becomes not just a verse to recite, but a reality to live. Each line is a layer of divine defense. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Faith. My help comes from the Lord. Trust. He will not let your foot slip. Stability. He who watches over you will not slumber. Vigilance. The Lord is your keeper. Covering. The Lord will watch your going out and coming in. Wholeness. Together, these words form the architecture of divine protection. They are not mere poetry. They are spiritual mechanics encoded with power. When you internalize these truths, you begin to see evidence of them everywhere. The sudden peace in the middle of crisis, the unexplainable survival through hardship, the inner strength that rises when all seems lost. These are signs that the shield of the Spirit is active. You are never unguarded, even in moments of silence. God's silence is not absence, it is the sound of unseen preparation. He watches every detail, from the grand unfolding of destiny to the smallest thought in your mind. The shield of heaven also carries within it a moral dimension. Divine protection does not give license for carelessness, it calls for holiness. A clean heart amplifies divine presence. The purer your motives, the clearer your connection with heaven's flow. Sin dulls awareness, but repentance restores it. God's mercy renews the shield each time you return to Him. You are never too far to be guarded again, never too broken to be restored. The shield is not earned, it is granted by grace, sustained by trust and strengthened by obedience. Through the centuries, countless believers have walked through fires and storms, yet their testimonies echo the same truth. God kept them. From Daniel in the lion's den to Paul in prison, from prophets in exile to martyrs in faith, all lived under the same watchful eye described in Psalm 121. They faced visible danger, yet were sustained by invisible grace. That same grace surrounds you now. The God who guarded them guards you with equal devotion, for His nature does not change. In every moment, visible or hidden, the hand of the Lord remains steady. No curse, no slander, no weapon, no spell, no intention of darkness can breach the wall of divine decree. The universe itself obeys His voice, and your destiny rests within His design. You need not fear what you cannot see, because what you cannot see is already under His command. The shield of heaven stands before you, behind you, and within you. It blocks what eyes cannot perceive and turns every threat into testimony. Therefore, walk in quiet assurance. Let peace be your evidence of protection. You are surrounded by grace, covered by purpose, and guarded by eternal vigilance. The Lord your keeper never blinks, never withdraws, never hesitates. His watch is constant, His defense absolute. Every step you take is known, every breath measured, every moment loved. Lift your eyes again to the hills, for your help has never left you. The same God who began your journey will finish it, and no hidden trap will ever steal what heaven has ordained. If this message strengthened your spirit, remember to subscribe to the channel so that more souls can find peace and divine truth through the living word that reminds us all. Heaven watches over you, and your destiny is untouchable. The eternal promise, God's presence that never leaves you. There is a moment in every spiritual journey when the soul stops searching for proof and begins to rest in presence. That is the essence of Psalm 121. It is not a psalm that promises an easy road, nor one that guarantees a life without storms. It promises something far greater, the assurance that no matter what rises against you, God's watchful presence remains constant. It declares that His eyes are always open, His hands always near, and His heart always inclined toward those who trust Him. This is not a temporary protection. It is an eternal covenant, a promise that transcends time and follows the believer beyond the boundaries of life and death. The Lord will watch over your going out and your coming in, both now and forevermore. Those words are not poetic closure. They are the divine signature at the end of a promise that cannot be broken. The psalmist, guided by divine revelation, was not merely writing about a momentary comfort. He was speaking of a reality that continues into eternity. The phrase, both now and forevermore, means that the keeping of God does not end when your breath ceases or when the body returns to dust. The divine watch extends into realms unseen, beyond the grave, into eternity itself. It is the promise that nothing, not even death, can separate the soul from the care of its Creator. This is the deepest form of security the human heart can know, the awareness that your existence is forever enclosed within divine attention. When we read these words, we are invited into a truth that surpasses the boundaries of human comprehension. God's protection is not confined to the visible journey of your earthly life. It continues into the unfolding of eternity, into dimensions that the human mind can only faintly imagine. The same God who watched over your first breath will watch over your final one, and then beyond, guiding the soul into the eternal light of His presence. The believer's story does not end with death. It continues under the same gaze that guided every step. The Lord does not stop keeping you. He simply changes the scenery of your journey. But before eternity unfolds, the believer must walk the long path of faith upon this earth, often through shadows, temptations, and unseen wars. And here is where the eternal promise begins to reveal its present power. The God who keeps you forever is the same who keeps you now. Eternity does not begin after life. It begins within life. The moment you awaken to His presence, you are already walking in eternity's light. You are already under the gaze of the infinite. The boundaries between now and forever dissolve, and you begin to live not in anxiety about tomorrow, but in awareness of divine constancy. To walk in this awareness is to understand that protection is not an event. It is a relationship. You are not guarded because you deserve it, but because you belong. God's keeping is the natural expression of His love. He cannot stop watching over you, for He cannot deny His nature. Love protects, love sustains, love endures. The psalmist wrote not as a philosopher, but as a man who had experienced the unbreakable loyalty of divine love. He had been hunted, betrayed, abandoned, and yet through it all, the eyes of heaven never turned away. He had faced darkness that threatened to swallow him, yet the Lord's presence remained his light. His testimony is the same one echoed by countless souls throughout history. God never left, even when everything else did. And so, the eternal promise becomes a call to rest. The human heart, restless by nature, often seeks security in the shifting sands of the world, in wealth, reputation, relationships, and achievements. But all these things fade, and the soul, left unanchored, trembles before the uncertainty of life. Yet the psalm whispers a different truth. Stability is not found in circumstances, but in presence. The one who truly believes that heaven watches over them no longer fears instability. They know that even when the ground shakes, the gaze of God does not. The eternal promise transforms how we perceive suffering. Many believers imagine divine protection as the removal of pain, but Psalm 121 reveals a greater mystery. Protection means preservation through pain. God does not always prevent the storm. He ensures that the storm purifies rather than destroys. He allows certain winds to blow not to harm, but to heal, not to break, but to build. The fire that refines gold is the same fire that would consume straw. For the believer, every fire becomes refinement because the presence of God stands within it. Just as the fourth figure stood with the three men in the furnace of Babylon, so too does the Spirit stand beside you in every trial. The flames may rise, but they cannot consume the soul kept by God. In this way, divine protection is not a promise of exemption, but of transformation. The psalmist does not say, "You will never face harm," but "The Lord will keep you from all harm." The difference lies in the outcome. Harm may approach but cannot remain. Evil may strike but cannot conquer. Pain may come but cannot define. In the divine equation, everything that touches the believer is compelled to serve divine purpose. Even the enemy becomes an unwitting instrument in the fulfillment of your destiny. When heaven watches, nothing is wasted. Not joy, not suffering, not waiting. Everything is woven into the tapestry of divine design. To live under this awareness is to live without fear of tomorrow. The future becomes not a threat, but a continuation of divine companionship. You realize that the same God who guided you yesterday is already waiting in your tomorrow. He has gone ahead to prepare the way, clearing obstacles you have yet to encounter. When you reach those moments that once frightened you, you discover that peace arrived there before you did. That is what it means to be kept by God. You do not face the unknown alone. The Creator of time walks ahead, rewriting your fears into victories. There is something profoundly humbling about knowing that the infinite God, who governs galaxies and commands angels, chooses to personally watch over a single soul. The magnitude of his attention is beyond comprehension. He watches not because he must, but because he loves. There is no hierarchy in his care. The smallest life receives the same vigilance as the stars. He knows your thoughts before you think them, your tears before they fall, your weariness before you admit it. You are fully known and fully loved, and that is the foundation of all true peace. The eternal promise also carries a responsibility. If you are kept by God, you must walk in awareness of that keeping. This awareness changes behavior. When you realize that divine eyes watch not to condemn, but to protect, you begin to live with integrity even when unseen by others. You act not out of fear of punishment, but out of reverence for presence. This awareness transforms the mundane into the sacred. Every act of kindness, every moment of patience, every choice of forgiveness becomes an offering before the one who watches. Life becomes worship, and the heart becomes a sanctuary. In the quiet of night, when fear whispers, "You are alone," the eternal promise answers, "You are seen." In the noise of the world, when chaos threatens to drown your peace, the eternal promise whispers, "You are held." Even when your prayers seem unanswered, heaven's silence is not absence, it is attention. God's stillness is not neglect, it is the pause between his movements. Sometimes he waits because he is aligning. Sometimes he is silent because he is listening more deeply than words can express. The believer who trusts this no longer demands constant signs. They rest in constant faith. This resting faith produces a serenity that the world cannot comprehend. It is the calm that allowed David to sleep while enemies surrounded him. It is the peace that allowed Jesus to rest in the storm. It is the assurance that made Paul sing in chains. These were not moments of denial, they were expressions of trust. They knew what the psalmist declared, "The Lord is your keeper." The keeper does not abandon his post, the watcher does not blink, the protector does not grow weary. God's keeping also extends to your destiny. Every purpose written over your life is guarded by the same hand that guards your soul. No enemy can steal what God has sealed. Many fear that missed opportunities, failures, or sins can cancel their calling. But divine keeping ensures restoration. What is truly ordained cannot be lost. God may allow detours, but He never erases destiny. Every delay can become development. Every mistake can become mercy in disguise. The one who watches over you also watches over the fulfillment of your purpose. To trust in the eternal promise is to surrender the illusion of control. Humanity clings desperately to control, believing it brings safety. But control is the great illusion of the fearful heart. The more we grasp for it, the more anxious we become. Yet the psalmist points to another way. Not control, but confidence. Confidence not in self, but in God. To say, "The Lord will watch over my life," is to release every burden of self-preservation into divine hands. It is to declare that the weight of survival does not rest on your shoulders, but on His. You are not meant to carry what God has already promised to hold. Once you understand this, your relationship with time itself changes. You no longer dread the future or regret the past because both are under the same gaze. The past cannot condemn you because it has already been seen and forgiven. The future cannot frighten you because it has already been seen and prepared. The present cannot overwhelm you because you are seen now. Time, which once felt like a prison, becomes a passage through which divine grace flows continually. Each moment becomes sacred because each moment is watched by God. There are times when you may question this truth, when pain feels unbearable, when prayers seem unanswered, when darkness lingers too long. You may wonder if heaven still watches. But even in those moments of questioning, you are seen. God's compassion does not waver when your faith trembles. He does not turn away because you doubt. He draws closer because you need. He is not angered by your weakness. He is moved by it. His watchfulness is not conditional upon your strength. It is rooted in His nature. You are kept not because you are perfect, but because He is faithful. Every story of redemption begins with a moment when someone thought they were forgotten, only to discover that heaven had been working in silence all along. Joseph in prison, Moses in exile, Elijah under the tree, Job in ashes, David in caves, all thought they were abandoned, yet each was being kept. The darkness they despised was the womb of divine purpose. Their pain became preparation, their isolation became revelation, and their tears became testimony. When their deliverance came, they realized that they had never been alone, not even for a second. And so it is with you. The same God who kept them keeps you. He watches over your nights of sorrow and your mornings of hope. He guards your soul, not only from external harm, but from the slow corrosion of despair. His light penetrates the deepest darkness, and His voice still whispers through the storms. He is closer than breath, stronger than fear, gentler than comfort, and more faithful than time. When you truly understand the eternal promise, your prayer life changes. You stop praying merely for rescue and start praying for revelation. You stop asking for everything to be easy and start asking to see His hand in everything. You no longer measure God's love by how many problems disappear, but by how much peace remains in their presence. You begin to see life itself as the unfolding of His keeping, a symphony of divine moments orchestrated to draw you closer to His heart. Eventually, faith matures into stillness. The believer who once cried for signs now sits in quiet trust, saying, Even if I cannot see, I know. This knowing is not intellectual, it is spiritual intimacy. It is the awareness that God's watching is not limited to protection, it is fellowship. To be watched by God is to be accompanied by God. You are never an observer in life's theater, you are the beloved under divine gaze. As the psalm closes, it does not end in fear or striving but in peace, both now and forevermore. Those words echo into eternity. They remind us that God's keeping is not a season, it is a state of being. You were kept before you were born, kept through every trial, and you will be kept when the stars fade. Nothing can alter that truth. Heaven watches not as a distant observer, but as an ever-present friend. So lift your eyes again, not just to the hills, but beyond them. To the one who made the hills, who watches the valleys, who knows the path you have not yet walked. Let this truth sink deeply. Your life is not random. It is recorded in divine memory. Every breath you take echoes in eternity, and every step you make unfolds beneath the gaze of a God who never blinks. Walk now in peace, knowing that every battle has already been seen, every danger already diffused, every need already supplied. You are surrounded by light that cannot be dimmed and loved by a presence that will never fade. This is the eternal promise of Psalm 121. Heaven watches over you, now and forevermore. If this message brought peace to your spirit, remember to subscribe to the channel for more revelations of faith and divine truth that remind you daily. God's eyes are upon you, His hand is over you, and His love will never let you go.